Hey folks, I'm Patrick Francie, host and creator of the podcast, The Everyday Millionaire, as well as the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters, where I'm joined by my world and Olympic class mental performance coach wife, Steffany Francie. And today we're digging into a topic that was driven by a quote by Rumi, which is yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. And we unpack this topic today. But before we get started, a couple things I want to bring up. First and foremost, the Everyday Millionaire has been an audio format for well over 7 years and literally tens of thousands of downloads. And we are really working hard to grow this YouTube channel, this YouTube community, if you will. So if you wouldn't mind, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, all of the things that we do on YouTube to actually get those algorithms fired up. Comment, and we will actually communicate with you in that way, see what you get out of this. If you like this podcast, let us know. And if you don't, that's okay too, but let us know what you don't like so we can put in those changes. As well, we are now launching our Shift program, Setting Honest Intentions for Transformation. That is our Shift program. We launched that in September. So if you're interested in working with Steffany and I, please go to the link below. You can find out all about that program. And other than that, I think that's all I got. So thanks for listening in. Hope you enjoy the show based on Rumi and a little bit of Gandhi in there as well, where we really talk about shift, setting honest intentions for transformation and being your best self. Listen in, enjoy. Hey folks, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast. Steffany.
Hey, hon.
Now, we've had a really busy week. We had a busy weekend. We are coming off an amazing real estate investment network event called the Accelerate Real Estate Accelerate Summit. Man, was it good. It was fantastic. And out of that always comes some really cool ideas and some observations when you're in a crowd and we're getting private messages. And although it was a virtual event, people are communicating, they're chatting, and they're doing all those things. So we got lots of things to talk about because it inspired a few, I guess, topics for us to go through this particular podcast. And you ready to get started?
I sure am. It was so great because we got to open the event with the end of an era conversation, which we've done a couple of podcasts on. And I think we got a little controversial and a little stretchy, but it was so cool to have live interaction and kind of like a podcast feel scenario presentation at the same time getting real live feedback. It makes me kind of want to do maybe some of these live.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be pretty fun.
Wouldn't it?
Yep. So we're going to get into it. A really famous quote. Yesterday, I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, so I am changing myself. And that is such a powerful quote. What does that mean to you?
Wow. Well, to me, it brings up one of my favorite songs in the world by Michael Jackson called Man in the Mirror. If you want to change the world, you got to look at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always been driven. I mean, remember how enthusiastic we were when we first got married, got together and started on this amazing transformational journey of self-discovery. And we wanted the world to just understand, and we wanted to make people feel what we were feeling and to really grow and all that stuff. And man, oh man, was that a lot of hard work and some pretty big, epic disappointments.
Well, it was big disappointments, right? We start to get on this journey of self-discovery. We learn things about the world. We learn things about ourselves. And all of a sudden, we want to share that with others. And we think everybody should be on this journey. And we think everybody wants to learn these things. And well, no, they don't. And that takes actually a long time to learn that because people patiently wait for us to speak and do all these things. And then they go on their way and they go, holy cow. Are these guys part of a cult? What the hell is going on? They're just not in the same conversation. So, at the end of the day, what it takes time to discover for many is that there is no changing anybody else. You really have to just change yourself. Therein lies the next quote, which is, be the change you want to see in the world. I think these two connect brilliantly. And it really boils down to, as you change, as you shift your thought processes, as you act differently because you are differently, you are differently. Oh, that's good English.
That's good English.
You are different. The thing is that when we start to understand our values, when we start to really kind of unpack how we see the world, because we're stepping into the next level of awareness, we change our decisions. We make different choices in terms of who we hang out with, how we communicate, where we surround or how we surround ourselves in terms of environment, culture, community. These are always big topics for us to share. What would you add to that?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me back in the day was I would have been a self-proclaimed self-help junkie. I think that's what led me to personal coaching and personal development until I realized that even as a coach, I didn't want people to change because I told them to change or what they should do. You don't hire a personal trainer to do your exercises for you. So what I realized is that whether I was speaking or coaching or doing something, and I would really try to get to the heart of something and inspire people to even make one small change in the direction of their goals, what would happen is the next morning after the caffeine high of the workshop or the talk or the coaching session or whatever, there would be a low.
Mm.
And I don't want to step over the fact that change is difficult. If it was easy, more people would do it, right? And I don't think change is so scary. I love change. If I was comfortable, I think in my life, I'd be super uncomfortable now, where most people are the opposite. They're seeking comfort. So those are the things I'd like to add. Change is difficult, and maybe not always necessary. Sometimes it's an internal shift that has to happen. And that's what I love about our shift program is that they're small internal shifts that have really big transformational results.
Yeah, and just to mention here that we are and have launching our next shift program. It is going kicks off in September. If you're interested, go to the link in the description or in the show notes, and you can find out all about registration. Now, when we talk about shift as an example, and I really love what you just said. Sometimes I think people are afraid of change because they think it's going to blow up their world, that it has to change everything. And to your point, it's sometimes just a simple, and I don't want to call it simple, but it is an internal shift. Nobody really notices other than all of a sudden you're maybe calmer, less stressed, you're less activated, you're less frustrated because you've had that internal shift of how you view the world. And when we talk about the shift program as an example, or coaching, let's just call it coaching, is that one of the things that we've learned very, very early on was that we have to enter the conversation where people are, not where we are, and not in our thought process. And understanding that change can be intimidating. It can be a little bit frightening. Like, why do I need to change? Well, consider, how do you feel? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you always feeling like you have to blame something? Are you feeling like the world is happening to you instead of for you? Where is your sense of happiness, your joy, your self-satisfaction? What is the, I guess, conversations you're having with yourself? Are you being self-deprecating, if that's the right word? Are you being critical? So when we really consider all of these things that are happening, they're very internal. So what if you're able to actually shift the way you view the world? What if you're actually able to step back and consider how you view the world? Because then you start to change. Keep in mind is that what drives us is our values. What drives us is how we see the world. Are we a victim to the world? Are we blaming? Are we complaining? We talk about that often. One of the most powerful books I think anybody could read is the with Jocko Willink, is called Extreme Ownership. And I would encourage everybody to read that book. I think it's one of those things that one of those books that really is impactful and powerful in terms of taking responsibility for your life. You and I say this often, is that our life is a reflection of who we're being. It's really that straightforward, how we see the world. So if we want to actually see change in our world, it's not about the world changing. It's not even about your friends or family changing. Although sometimes we go, I wish they'd change. At the end of the day, all we can do is change our view of the world. And that's where the work really starts.
I'm going to just expand on that a little bit around the inner work is that what it did for me is it led me back all the way around to just a deeper level of self reflection and self acceptance. So even though it was a change, I was driven to change or I wanted to grow and I knew there was more out there and knew there was more in there and I wanted to have deeper conversations with people. What it brought me to was a layer of self acceptance that I'd never had before. Because I think when I'm working with people and they're trying to change, it's like they're in some ways maybe potentially running away from something, or running away from a truth that's true for them that they maybe don't want to admit. And so they want someone to tell them how to feel better about that. So the first thing is around self-reflection and self-acceptance is getting to that shift of being able to tell yourself the truth. Look at the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror, and tell that person the truth about what's going on. Do you really need to change, or do you need to find a way, a journey into a layer of self-acceptance?
Well, there's some things going on in the world, of course, that we really have to, shine a light on and discuss because, we've said many times when we see all that's happening in the world these days, you start to realize just how much fear, how much uncertainty, how do we move forward, between what's going on, let's say war, Russia, Ukraine, China, what's going on in the UK, what's happening right here in Canada can be a lot of, I guess, frightening things that are throwing people off. Now, then we're looking at social change, cultural change, when we look at the woke versus the awake, when we consider the shifts in polarization and divisiveness, we're into this world that is happening all around us. And how do we actually thrive in this environment? How do we not walk around angry all the time or walk around totally, I guess, disillusioned with what's happening in the world and want to just shut down and want to quit? We're seeing it a lot and hearing about it a lot where people don't want to work, they don't want to show up, we can't get people moving, not showing up on any given day of work is just because it's like, we've given up. We don't care. There's a lot, it seems to be, and that's all anecdotal, of course, a lot of that going on. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you are likely an overachiever. You're likely somebody who is really considering, how can I be my best self? How can I actually deal with these things? What are some of the tools that I can maybe bring forward and put into our life? Now, this goes back to, again, the quote, which is, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I am changing myself. And to add to that, be the change you want to see in the world. Like, really embrace it, because always, let's get grounded in one fundamental thing. The change is always about and within us.
It is. And that's what's so interesting when I talk to people of all walks of life. The level of awareness that someone has is generally a reflection of how they view themselves. We had a person say years ago about how aware they were. And I was saying, yeah, what does that even mean? Like, I feel like I have a high level of self-awareness, but what do you mean? She goes, well, I'm just aware of how messed up everybody is.
Mm.
And she was holding herself kind of as the the temperature gauge, or the litmus test for awareness. I'm like, that's probably the least aware thing I've ever heard in my whole life. I mean, if you're not self-aware of how you're occurring in the world, and then you don't get that your life is a reflection of that, wow, we're not even in the same conversation. And the same thing happens when I hear a victim tone in people's voice, is that, if I'm hearing a victimology or a victim kind of a conversation coming from somebody about where I'm, a victim, or where something's happening to me, or there's that blame or that shame or those excuses about not moving forward or not taking responsibility. I hear that a lot more than I have in the past. And I think what's happened is that people are being told they're victims and being given a narrative that there's something wrong with them. And if they don't do something, they're not going to be safe. And if they do something, they're not going to die. So we're being told a narrative right now that is actually counterintuitive, or counteracting our natural need to evolve and to grow. I mean, my goodness, if I was still a caterpillar, I don't know, I would think you would have squished me with your heel. But my whole journey about, getting out of that restrictive kind of mindset that I was in really is what, I mean, the analogy is from obviously caterpillar to a butterfly, right? And really wanting to stretch into that. But I'm hearing a lot in the languaging right now. Some of the interviews we're doing with potential shift clients, I'm hearing that victim language, and I really am excited to help people shift that. Not necessarily change, because there's going to see their own journey through change, but to start that first initial shift.
Well, it is an interesting time, isn't it? And let's make no mistake. I mean, when we look back, pre 2020 and get through 2020, and here we are at 2023, there's a lot, there's pre, there's during it all, and then there is post. And I'm a little bit hesitant to use certain words because of algorithms, but at the end of the day, the world is kind of messy these days, isn't it? And there's so many things that we just have no control over, and all we can control is I guess, how we handle the world. And is it frightening? Yes. Is it a little bit disconcerting? Yes. Is it, confusing? 100%. Is it like the social disruption that's happening today is really just kind of going off the charts? And it's easy to fall and to be, or even believe, I guess, that you are a victim to it, because it's a lot of what we're being fed in terms of some of our government and some of our policymakers. It's like everybody's a victim to what's going on. And while some of that can feel true, how we handle the world, how we move into the world is going to be how we actually change within ourselves, how we view ourselves and how we view what we're going to take on in this kind of dynamic change into a new era. So, some of the tools that we often talk about is really about reflection. It's about meditation. It's about journaling. It's about creating an environment and setting yourself up in a culture of like-minded individuals. Here's the thing is that in the breakdown of so many relationships that have happened, we've seen it. And I know that many of our listeners have either seen it or perhaps even being a part of it, family members, significant others, that there's that diversity. Now, we talk a lot about that on the show. So it sometimes seems like it's always bad news, but it's not. Many that we've seen, a lot of those changes that happened turned out to be for the better. It's like this kind of, I don't know, I don't want to call it a purge, but it's like cleaning up the mess that has built up. You're forced to kind of review relationships. You're forced to kind of get your house in order in some regards and to chart to change. Those who do will actually prosper in this new era as we go forward. We talked a lot about that this weekend, and how technology will change the world, for example, and is changing the world, and how we can embrace technology is just one example of the new era. Now, when we think about the change we need to be, the change that we have to be in the world, how do you kind of guide your clients? Because you've got athletes and business clients that are dealing with all the things that they're dealing with. Is there a kind of go-to, start by doing this?
Well, yeah, one of the first things, of course, is to identify their values and to start cleaning up incompletions. In order to set a new goal, in order to set a big goal, you have to be prepared of all the disruption that's going to happen in your life. The bigger the goal, the bigger the disruption. And what I do is try to normalize that. Now, normalization is a technique that I use with a lot of my clients that allows them to not normalize things like mediocrity or being average, or the strive to be normal. When you normalize normal, then we're in trouble. So the word that I use is, when we clean up our incompletions, I mean, we can create on top of incompletions, but it creates a whole bigger mess. So the first thing I do is help them identify their incompletions in all 7 areas of life, and then gently work them through. And the faster we can get through the incompletes, the cleaner their conversations get, the more focused they get on their goals, and the less distractions that are they allow to come in. Their thought processes slow down, the focus goes up, etc. So the normalizing of normal really is something that I have to push back. That creates a lot of inertia, and not necessarily with the high achievers and the high performance and the H&W clients that I work with, but with people who are really striving for comfort. That's not really even, I don't think, who's listening to this podcast. So if we can normalize not being normal, instead of what we're being forced to do is we're forced to be being average. We're forced to, identify a certain way and make sure that we're more important, in one area or the other, or we're being forced, this whole equity thing is being forced upon us. Equity is not about meritocracy. Equity is not about everything being equal. It's about lowering expectations. So when I bring those kinds of conversations forward, I try to neutralize them. And the minute we take the charge, or the emotional, physical, or the intellectual charge off something, then I can move forward with a new conversation. And again, the bigger the goal, the bigger the chaos.
Well, it's something that you bring forward in the conversation of incompletions. I think this is so important, is as we kind of again go into a new dynamic, a new era, the world shifting, changing, because it is. And the incompletions we talk about is, what are we going to leave behind? Why do we need to bring this into the new era with us, and those are incompletions around conversations that need to be had relationally with friends, with family, with significant others. What are you operating on top of? So in other words, what is it that somebody continues to do that is pissing you off? So either you've got to talk to them and say, I can't operate that way. Like I can't live into that uh, dynamic of environment or how you're showing up, and or you have to shift how you view the world. Either way, something has to change, so you're not dragging that charge, if you will, that trigger into where you want to go to. Those are incompletions, and certainly there's the incompletions around, is your environment, do you need to change your environment? Have you It's a bit of a task, but it's an incompletion. What's your wardrobe? You got 10 years worth of clothes hanging in your closet that you keep threatening to lose weight to get into, or gain weight to get into, or we got to get rid of it because it's out of fashion. And all of a sudden it just continues to build up. These are all things that we have to let go of, and those are incompletions because they're energy leaks. They keep sucking energy, so that when we're going forward, it's like this weight that we're carrying, and we need to let some of that weight go.
Do you remember reading the book back in the day when we first started our journey, The Celestine Prophecy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. And that was a lot about, moving forward on your journey and having to let go, not just of belief systems or having to complete conversations, but to physically let go of the things that are in the way of you moving forward in your life. And I thought that was such a powerful book. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but if you do get a chance to read it or listen to it, it's quite, I found it one of the disruptive books that I've ever read that gave me a new courage, similar to The Alchemist in that regard. So those two books were about change and about letting go and about transforming a certain way of being or a thought process, but in a way that still moved you forward. You made a really good point just about incomplete conversations with people. I'm going through something right now where potentially I could lose the entire generation. My two aunties have passed away within a month of each other. Another one is about to pass away this shortly. And then my dad. So that's an entire legacy, a generation of family that could potentially pass away within 6 months in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I think of incompletions and I think of moving forward and losing that many family members in 1 year, I have to go inside and go, okay, have I said everything I need to say to each of them? Do I have the courage to tell them I love them? Do I have the courage to say maybe some things that I've wanted to say, but I've held back? Is it worth it? Is it kind? Does it make sense to do that now? And so looking at that, then at the same time, not comparing at all, but the closet conversation. I mean, since 2020, I haven't worn any of my business clothes. My travel outfits have changed. Things are going to change, and those are little stuck energies, but they're also stuck money. So when we look at change and transformation and growth and moving forward, is to look at 7 areas of life, but also look at, the clutter. I look at, I somehow have this amazing relationship with clutter. I seem to know where everything is, but to other people, it really looks cluttered. So how I judge myself around that can also be an incompletion, because I spend a lot of time worrying what other people think about my spaces. So when we talk about change, we talk about being the change. It's also, and again, I don't want to step over this, it's also about a level of self-awareness and self-acceptance, not making excuses for myself, or for anybody else, but to make the changes and make decisions from a place of, this is going to move me forward. This is what's going to move me towards my goal. And this is what's going to align with my values, so that I can eliminate all the clutter, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical, whatever. So clutter is a thing that is also could be in the way. And also I work with a lot of people on their emotional clutter.
Emotional clutter, that's a good one. I like that thought process, because it really is, I think, a good description of what's going on for many people is emotional clutter. When we talk about creating a life by design, for example, often we see people, and I know that I'm guilty of this as well, is that you go to this physical, environment that you're trying to create. So it takes money, and you want a beautiful home, and you want all the things you want all the stuff. And when we think about creating a life by design, it's easy to step over, well, what else could that mean besides stuff? We're at a point in our life where stuff really isn't our thing. It's really about creating an amazing environment, but it's also about how are we feeling about our life. And we have to understand that we take responsibility for that. So creating a life by design for me has also morphed into how are we feeling about the life that we have, the relationships that we have, the sense of, I guess, accomplishment and or the sense of joy or happiness overall. And it's been a tough year, for both of us, I think, in that regards. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, with all that we've dealt with this year, if we didn't have the tools and the skills that we have, I think sometimes we would have just totally melted down. And, the thing about that is when you start to have these tools, when you start to look at life through a different lens, a lot of things can come at you. And it's kind of like the Matrix, when he, in that last scene, when he looks down the hallway and, everybody just turns into zeros and ones, and he just kind of, takes all the bad guys and, blows them out the door, or whatever that last scene was. It was because of how he viewed the world. He really was just understanding that how he saw it. And I don't want to pretend I know the concept of Matrix inside out, but the point is that that's what shifted for him. It was the shift of how he saw himself. And then that changed how he saw, in this case, the bad guys. But the point is that with all that was going on, the change was with him. And I think it's just a good kind of, maybe it's not a metaphor for, how we have to look at life. And for anybody, I think that when we look at the emotionality behind things, it's what really can fuck up our day, our week, our month, our life. If there's blame, if there's complain, if there's victim, if this shit is always happening to me, why is it always bad luck? It's the case of, I always remember somebody who worked for me who once sat down and she goes, my dad always told me if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
going, oh boy, did
What a
you ever
message.
take that? Did you ever take that on? Because this girl was, every day was a drama. I had to let her go.
Wow.
I just couldn't deal with the dramas that she dealt with. But then when she shared that with me, I had so much more empathy and understanding for her thought process. Her dad literally said that to her. She, was a young lady. She, he basically said, young lady, if it wasn't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all, it seems.
Wow, when you think about the influences that we have when we say things like that, even if it's tongue in cheek, that's really sad.
I know. Anyways, we carry on. So the point is that how we see the world is incredibly important. The change we need to see is within myself, as Rumi says. And when we expand on that, we start to understand and see the world differently.
What's the Wayne Dyer quote that you used to like hammer me with all the time, about the way that you look at things?
When we change the way we look at things, the things
The
we
things
look
we
at
look at
change.
change. Say it again.
When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change.
Yeah, so this podcast has been all about these amazing quotes about shifting and changing. It's not like it's a new concept, from Wayne Dyer to Rumi all the way back to, the beginning of time, is that human beings, I think we're driven to grow. And in order to grow, we need to understand. Did you know that's the lobster story? Do you know how lobsters grow?
Remind me. I
Okay,
do.
lobsters are like really like fleshy and soft, and we think of them as hard in their little shells, right? They're not. They're soft, and then they grow into their shell, and then they are so uncomfortable that they go and they lodge themselves under a rock lobster, until they can break out of that shell and it cracks open, and then they're soft and vulnerable again. That's why they don't want to change, is because they're vulnerable again. But then the shell starts to grow around them, and it restricts their growth again, and they get super uncomfortable. So as this goes over time, is that is like kind of how I feel sometimes, is that this restricting, and it's painful, and I know I have to grow. I know I have to pop whatever shell or image or thought process, because it's so uncomfortable that I've gotten used to that uncomfortable thing, meaning the more uncomfortable it is, the more important it is that I have to shift and grow into my what's next, because I love that lobster story.
Well, it's a great point. And, we hammer that one, some version of that often, which is to say that there is no growth in status quo. You have to get uncomfortable. There is, that's universal law. You're going to build an empire. You're going to build something. You're going to change in some way. It's going to get tested. It's actually going to get tested and say, okay, are you serious about this? Okay, well, here, let me just throw a little test at you and just see how profound you are. Let's see how Zen like you are. Let me throw a little drama at you and see how you react. in this case of this drama, you think you're so zen like. These are things that often happen. You build a great business, it gets tested. You have a relationship with people, even significant other, it gets tested. And it really is universal law. But the reason it gets tested goes back to that foundational. It is survival of the fittest. And the fittest means that when you get tested, you step up, you grow, you get stronger from that particular test. And that is such an important concept to understand. And I would encourage anybody to reflect on your life and just think about the times that you have grown. Always before the growth came something. It came a stretch. It came something, a drama. It came something, something showed up that you had to work through. You had to push yourself. You had to grind it out and figure it out. And that's where the growth lives, is in those tests. Like going to the gym, you want to get stronger, add an extra plate to that bar, that tests you. And that's where the strength and the growth lives, is in those tests and in those challenges that we have to face. And if we look at that and embrace it, it's not, well, let's face it, it's not for everybody. A lot of people are just okay, and that's fine. I don't think many of them are listening to this podcast, but the reality is there's just some people that we look at them and you go, gosh, you're just in the TikTok of the world, and you don't understand it. We don't understand it, because we're driven to always be in a growth mode, and sometimes we go, okay, we need to just chill out.
Yeah, we need to step back for a second, reevaluate, take a look at the terrain, make sure we're still going in the right direction. But, I can't tell you one single athlete that said to me, I want to be an Olympic champion, that hasn't had a massive test to the point where they want to quit. And sometimes I have to take them through an exercise called permission to quit in order for them to feel what it would be like if they gave up on themselves and gave up on their goals. And I truly believe not one of the champion athletes that I've worked with has had it easy. It looks like it when they're on top of the podium, or when people sign the big deal or the big record deal or whatever. It looks all beautiful and rosy for one moment. But the truth is they have had to overcome a lot and embrace a lot of adversity on the way. And that, to me, that's the test. If you can see the adversity, oh, look at there's some adversity. What am I going to have to do? Do I have to clean up an incompletion? Do I have to have a conversation with somebody? Do I have to slow down? Do I maybe have to do a rest and recovery day? What do I have to do in order to move through this? And many times what I find is that it's a conversation, or it's a belief system that they have to bust in order to go to the next level. And I think that could be a whole other podcast around belief systems.
Well, it is interesting. It's like you can't go into chapters, you can't go on Kindle and see a whole section called How to Be Amazing at Mediocrity.
There's not one? Really?
There isn't a section about that. What happens is we start to realize that we're being mediocre, or we are living a mediocre life, and we want to do more, be more. We want to show up differently. We want to actually be the change we want to see in the world. Hence, we listen to these podcasts. Hence, we get coaching. And how do we get better? We hire that coach that takes us to the gym. We hire that personal development coach. We register for Shift. Hopefully,
Exactly.
people will register for Shift. We're here. We're now. But something that showed up this weekend, and as we start to wind down, I want to shine an interesting light on something. We hear from literally hundreds of people on any given month within the real estate investment network community. Oh, I want to go back to live events. I just wish we could have live events. And understanding that what we did this past weekend, was we said, okay, there's a live event and there's a virtual way of doing this. Register for either, and here we go. And 99% registered for virtual. Now,
Wow.
what's interesting about that is I get what people are saying, but I think what people are really saying is, I just want to get together and hang out. I don't want to go and, I don't want to go to a webinar. I don't want to do a live learning event, although I know some do. But we offered that option for people, and many people registered, like a lot. It was just a really great number of people that said, no, I'm in, but I'm going to do it virtually, because let's face it, virtual is convenient. I don't have to find parking. I don't have to find babysitting. Yeah. I don't have to put up with traffic. I can turn off my camera and have my dinner, and have my kid on my lap, or my dog, whatever. The point is that it was an interesting little shift that we're seeing with, as much as people say, I want a live event, when it comes to time to step up and go, okay, here we go. They go, no, that's the timing's not right. So it's just an interesting observation.
But look at what we've normalized. We've
Yeah.
normalized staying at home.
Yeah.
We're normalizing, Zoom. We're normalizing, having meetings online, which, and to your point before, is that it's the cost of it, the decrease in cost of travel. For example, if you want to go to Toronto for a meeting from Vancouver, it's 10 hours just in travel.
Mm.
So it's a 3-hour, or sorry, a 3-day trip for a 1-day meeting.
Mhm.
So there are some conveniences,
Yeah.
but the normalization piece, what I'd like people to consider, to stretch into, is also notice what else you may have normalized. Are you normalizing staying at home? Sometimes, honey, I'll watch you go, you'll go to Home Depot and you'll still have your slippers on,
Mhm.
or you'll jump in the truck with the dogs with your slippers on. And I'm like, okay, what are we normalizing here? Sometimes I won't wash my hair for 4 days. I have to look at some of those things and get not just those self-care habits back, but also take a look at some of the things we've normalized, like
Mm.
having meetings on Zoom, or not leaving the house, not leaving the compound, or making plans and then breaking them at the last minute. So I do want to, shine a light a little bit on some of the downsides of that.
Yeah. All I know is when I go to Home Depot with my bunny ear slippers, the trades guys that are there start to laugh at me until I tell them that they're steel toed bunny ear
Right.
slippers.
See,
So anyway,
adaptation.
we just
You're
have
so
to adapt.
adaptable.
Okay, folks. Well, Steffany, anything you want to add as we wind this down? Anything you left feel like you need to add before we shut down?
No, I think the biggest thing I don't want to add, I want to reiterate, is that when we normalize things and we justify being mediocre, just to know you're ripping yourself off, stretch, grow, even if it's just a little bit every day, step into your what's next in a way that doesn't have to be all powerful and best life, ongoing, but just know that that's possible, and to take a look at what you may be normalizing that's holding you back from having the goal. And if you say you want something, go for it and be prepared to be tested.
I think it's a great point, and just a reminder for everybody that being your best self is internal. It is not external. And go within, and you won't ever go without. Steffany,
That
thank
was
you.
fun.